Alice GRECZYN, thanks so much for coming back on to Talk Police from your home in Los Angeles. You are an actor and a writer, as well as the founder of Dare to Doubt, an online resource for those who have left faith. In our last interview, we heard your story of your transition out of an evangelical upbringing, a nomadic life full of prayer, prophecy, and chastity. So how have you been, Alice? You've been doing quite a few interviews lately. Are you enjoying it?
I am enjoying it. I enjoy being able to contribute to other people feeling less alone in their own journey in and out of faith. I really enjoy hearing from people who have been through something similar, because it's very rare that I meet other people who had upbringing similar to mine. So me being open about my story has connected me with some other people who can relate, and I feel like a little bit less of an alien and hopefully make other people feel a little bit less of an alien themselves.
Much of your transition out of faith happened after moving to LA to become an actor. Now, something we didn't have time to get into in our last interview was your encounters with acting class cults. But before we get into that, let's just hear about your journey as an actor in Hollywood.
I was very lucky. My first year living in LA, I was 17. I started working right away almost, which, knowing what I know now, is pretty amazing, because a lot of people give up everything and come out here, and it can take months to a year or two just to get an agent. And so it just felt to me like acting was indeed my calling from God. And the fact that I was booking these jobs confirmed his will for my life was to stay in Hollywood and pursue acting for the time being. And acting was very challenging for me because, as I spoke about in our last interview, I grew up heavily indoctrinated within purity culture, saving myself entirely for my future husband and body, heart, and mind. And in my acting class was where I had my first kiss, actually, at 17, with a scene partner. And it was a miserable experience for me because I felt so conflicted, because clearly God had called me to acting, I believed. And acting required kissing scenes, especially if you're a young girl in the industry or a young guy. So I figured that if this was God's will for my life, that I'd be an actor, I'd better learn how to act. And part of that meant doing this scene where I had to kiss my scene partners from a Tennessee Williams play called The Glass Menagerie. Nothing graphic, nothing over the top, nothing that I felt exploited by or anything like that. Very, very simple kiss, but I just felt so guilty afterward because I felt like I betrayed my future husband, even though God wanted me to, or so I believed. So yeah, that was one of the first experiences that I had in an acting class that really challenged my faith quite a bit.
And of course, acting classes are prevalent in the Los Angeles area, not just for aspiring actors, but for established actors wanting to hone their technique. Alice, what are your first memories of acting classes?
So first memories of acting classes are, one of my first memories is doing what felt like very ridiculous behavior. So in acting classes, and here we'll get into a little bit more of what, in my opinion, can become cultic behavior in an acting class, but because this is related, so put a pin in that. We'll come back to that. One of my first memories of being in an acting class was the goal of many acting classes is to help the actor get over their ego. Because the ego can make us self-conscious about our performance, and our performance is supposed to be truthful. And when our ego is in the way and we're worried about what other people are thinking, it can be inhibiting to a good performance. So there's all of these weird exercises designed to help actors overcome their ego. And one of the first ones that I remember doing was walking around the floor in a weird circle with all of my acting classmates as the teacher shouted out different animals that we were supposed to be. So we're doing like bear walks, crab walks, like very very weird, like games that you'd play with preschoolers, basically. But we're all like in our late teens, early 20s, and doing these exercises. So that's one of my first memories of being in an acting class, and most of them are like that. I'll let you guide where the conversation should go from here in terms of where we want to get into my uncomfortability with most acting classes and why.
So what exactly is an acting class cult? Are they similar in any way to the religious cults that we hear about?
In my opinion, yes, because just to disclaim, I know the word cult is very loaded. It can mean different things to different people. The way that I will be using the word cult is a group that comes to feel destructive to you as an individual. I think it's a very individual threshold for how healthy or not a group is. So owning that, taking responsibility for the subjectivity of one's own experience within any group. Yes, I think cults are found anywhere. I think cults are found in religion. They're found in acting. They're found in politics. They're found anywhere there's people and just the dynamics of human behavior. There can be cultic behavior as a result of that, like harmful things. And to me, some of the distinguishing hallmarks of cultic behavior would be, first and foremost, in my opinion and to my experience, questions are not safe to ask. There's a set of right and wrong questions, but there are very clearly some questions that you're told in so many ways you're asking the wrong question. You're questioning the authority of the leader. You're questioning the doctrine of the ideology. You're questioning the dynamics at play that come to feel unhealthy, but you're being told are good. So asking questions, if you're in a group where you don't feel safe to ask a question, whether you think it might be a stupid question or a good question, if you feel like your questions are being met with condemnation or shame or gaslighting or denial, that in my opinion should be a pretty big red flag. Again, no matter what the setting is, if you don't feel safe to ask a question, to learn, or to challenge because you see something that's not adding up or that doesn't feel right, let that just be a little warning. So in an acting class environment, asking a question could be, for example, challenging the teacher's authority. So I'll just use an example. I went and audited a particular acting class in LA that made me very uncomfortable. And the thing with acting classes is they're often designed to make you uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable being vulnerable and raw and perform in front of a teacher and all of your classmates. It's a very excruciating environment sometimes because you're being judged on your performance. And like if you're an actor, usually this is something that you want more than anything, something you've given up your life back home for. You've maybe invested all of your savings into your, couch hopping and like struggling to make ends meet. Like most actors who come to LA and maybe New York too, but I can't speak to that because I'm an LA actor. But you have to really, really want it, or in my case, believe God's called you to it, to give your all to it. So similar to some religious groups, it's very all-consuming, the pursuit of acting, like the pursuit of living a most pure expression of faith. It's you give up a lot for it. In my childhood, my parents gave up their worldly possessions and employment because they believed that was what God wanted us to do. So in an acting sense, like I gave up a lot of security and stability myself and a lot of my own finances to pursue acting. It's something that you really need to be there. And in an acting class, actors are very vulnerable to, so I've described acting classes as unqualified group therapy because acting is basically a study of human psychology. And just like there are harmful therapeutic groups, there's harmful acting groups. And a lot of acting teachers, it's a cliche in Hollywood that most acting teachers are themselves failed actors. And that I don't think is true of all acting teachers. I think some teachers just love teaching. And let me just disclaim right now, I do not believe that all acting classes are cultish at all. There's a class that I do now that I really love, that I feel totally safe in. But to show an example of a class that I did not feel safe in, I audited this class, and a girl did this incredible scene. It was like a monologue scene, and I was blown away. By the way, to audit a class means you're just a viewer checking it out, just for anyone who doesn't know. So I'm watching this class, and I'm blown away by the performances of the students here, and I'm thinking like, wow, maybe this is a good class to be a part of, because everyone's pretty good. And this girl's scene was just amazing. And the teacher, a little old lady, she at the end was like, basically told the girl that was terrible. And she said, it's clear you didn't do the work. And the girl's like, oh, I really thought I had done the work though. And she's like, no, that's your ego getting in the way, saying that you've done the work. So what I saw, and I can't remember verbatim, like exactly how it played out, but what I saw was someone trying to stand up for themselves and an authority figure gaslighting them for her own power trip. That's what was clear to me. And I've seen that before in other acting classes too. This was not new.
So is there a bit of narcissism there in terms of the actual acting class teacher?
Oh, yes. I would find out later that this teacher, whose class I ended up not going to because there were many things about this class that felt abusive and harmful to me. This teacher would be known for exploiting actors' vulnerabilities. Like in private one-on-one sessions, the actors would divulge instances of their personal life that they could use for the scene and substitute. Because in acting, it's common, like, say I have to do a scene where, my parent dies. In real life, both my parents are living, but I can think of another time in my real life where I've experienced loss and grief. And so I will think of that scene, maybe. This is just one technique of many that actors use. And so in working with an acting coach, it's not uncommon to expose very deep personal shit about your own life so they can help you find certain shortcuts to giving a good performance. So it's very easily exploitable, as I'm sure anyone listening can tell. And I found out that this acting teacher whose class I audited would reveal personal things that students told her in confidence in front of the whole class as a bullying technique, to tell them, this is that time, that you were raped or whatever, and your ego's getting in the way and you're not giving a truthful performance, because it was a combinations of gaslighting, narcissism, abuse of trust, like all of these hallmarks that are evident in a lot of cultic groups.
And it's reminding me of Scientology and NXIVM, which are also very sort of like, I would say Hollywood based, but there's a lot of Hollywood people involved in it, where you do have to sort of bare your soul to them. And then they've got all this dirt on you. I mean, I think in NXIVM, they call it Collateral. And they've got this again, and then they can use that to manipulate you.
Yes, and that's common. They can use that to manipulate you, to guilt you, to shame you, to trigger you. Other acting classes I've been to, teachers will assign students really overt sexual scenes where they'll have to fake sex scenes, and it's exploiting. Like it's such a fine line, because acting does require a degree of being intimate with other acting partners in what should be a safe setting. And when it feels yucky to you and you feel like your teacher is just getting his or her jollies off watching you strip in front of the class and mime sexual acts with a partner, if it feels yucky to you, it probably is yucky. Or it's just not for you, and you should have the freedom to say no with no consequence. But if you say no, like, oh, I don't really want to do that scene, and the teacher's response is, you need to get over your ego though, like, do you really want to be an actor? Are you sure? Because if you can't do scenes like this, maybe you don't really want acting. That's bad. Like, that is bad for any person or teacher or scene partner, for anyone to tell you to disrespect your boundaries of what you're comfortable with by using your desires against you. If your desire is to be an actor, and like I said before, it takes a lot to pursue this career. It does. You usually really want it. So if an established acting teacher who's coached famous award-winning, Oscar-winning actors is telling you, you need to get over your ego and do the sex scene in front of me and everyone else because you're going to be on a set one day doing it in front of everyone else, it's very difficult to say no, because there's sound logic to that argument. And many people are compromised and because they're manipulated in that way. They're guilted and peer pressured in that way to do things they're not comfortable with. And maybe not even a sex scene. Maybe it's just some other scene that's like, it goes against your beliefs or whatever. You just don't feel comfortable. Like, again, I'm not saying that all of these exercises are necessarily bad. I don't think it's very helpful to think of groups in terms of this is a good group, good teacher, bad teacher. I think it's far more helpful to focus on, how is this group for you? Is this a good or bad group for you? Is this a good or bad teacher for you? Because if we fixate too much on trying to objectively be able to make a blanket statement of this group is a cult, this one is not a cult, I think we do ourselves and others a disservice, because it abdicates us from taking personal responsibility for our and credit for our own wisdom and our own intuition, whatever words you want to use. And I think it's just more empowering to let go of the labels and just be like, how do I feel in this group? Do I feel safe? Do I feel nurtured? Do I feel like my questions are welcome? Do I feel like shame and guilt are ever present when I object to something? Do I feel do I feel comfortable here? Or do I feel ashamed of myself when I go home at the end of the night? Do I feel shitty about myself? Do I leave feeling like I'm such a bad actor, or I'm such a bad believer? You know, how is this group or teacher or person making you feel? And I think that that's going to be a far more helpful way to gauge whether or not something is healthy or destructive for you, because you're responsible for you. No one else is. You know, it's just you. And so I really think it's important to emphasize that, whether we're talking about acting class cults or other things, because what's good for one person may not be good for another. Steve Hassan, a cult expert, said regarding a church environment that a lesbian woman will have a very different degree of undue influence in an evangelical church than, say, a straight white married man with kids. She's going to have a very different experience in that church community than a straight white man will. So same thing with any acting class cult, or everyone learns differently. It doesn't matter. I think it's not helpful to focus on trying to be black and white about good, bad, safe, not. Cult, group. How do you feel in it? What's your experience in it? And let that be your guide in terms of how you decide to move forward or not, because then I think people would find freedom and help a lot sooner if we weren't so tempted to be in denial about whether or not a group is actually harmful for us. So getting back to acting classes, there's a lot of abusive techniques that are very common in a lot of other spiritual communities too, where there's often a narcissistic amount of authority worship, where an acting teacher, you know, is like, they can blend spiritual techniques into it, like chanting, meditating, depriving oneself of food, work study arrangements, where like maybe if I'm a broke, struggling actor, I can't afford, you know, $500 a month to go to class, so I will work for the acting teacher, which may end up being really long hours. I may end up feeling exploited. There's all sorts of ways that acting classes mimic spiritual communities, because you want it more than anything, the same way you want a relationship with God, or to be part of a mission more than anything. You're willing to give up a lot to make it happen. You're willing to trust an authority who has reason for you to trust them. You know, a lot of, in my opinion, unhelpful or unhealthy acting coaches are very legitimate. They've worked with a lot of big names, and so it makes it even harder. You second guess yourself. The same way in a spiritual community, you might say like, oh, but they're a prophet. You know, all these other people affirm them as a prophet. In the acting world, it's like, oh, but they're credible. You know, look, they've worked with this actor and this actor, like making it harder for you to feel like you can challenge them if they say something, because they're such an established and revered askist authority. Yeah. So, but that's, and again, not all acting teachers are bad. So many of them are just genuinely love teaching. And again, the line between acting technique and psychological abuse is very fine sometimes.
You personally know actor friends who were involved in acting class cults and have since left. So what advice would you give to anyone who might be in an acting class cult or know someone who is?
If the person is aware that they've been part of a harmful group, that whether they use the word cult or not, I think my first piece of advice is to be easy on yourself. It's okay. It happens to the most intelligent people find themselves in cults and harmful groups. And I think it's very easy to, first of all, be in denial that you were part of a cult, because that would mean maybe you're a stupid person if you were part of a cult. No, you're not. Like, again, some of the most intelligent, intuitive people have found themselves in very destructive groups. And I think, so the first thing is be honest about how you're feeling, and try not to judge yourself for it. If you're feeling wronged, if you're feeling betrayed, if you're feeling hurt, abused, whatever it is you're feeling, it's okay. And try to be aware of that little voice that's like, oh, how could I have fallen for this? It was so obvious. I'm so stupid. I think that's a very common refrain among people who are leaving harmful groups. And I know I can certainly relate to that. Like, how could I have not have seen this coming? It's like, that's not helpful. It's okay to have those thoughts. But what I do is I just thank them. It's like, oh, thank you, voice. I know you're just trying to keep me safe and prevent this from happening again. But shame, I don't think helps us grow or heal. So I guess that's first and foremost, like, let yourself feel whatever it is you need to feel, and try to be mindful of not letting shame or self-condemnation inhibit you from healing or growth, or keep you in a place of denial. Secondly, I've found it with friends of mine who have been part of an acting class cult that they were part of for a few years. They found it really helpful to, and this is common across all different groups, when members leave, is to connect with other ex-members. So my friends connected with other students who had left that acting class cult, and it was so validating for them, the way it's validating for people of other religious or spiritual cultic groups to find each other and be like, yeah, did she do this to you? She did this to me too. You know, it can be very helpful and therapeutic to know that you're not alone, you're not crazy. There's typically patterns of behavior that play out in certain groups, and it can be very cathartic and validating to hear that from someone else who's also left. So I think that's another really helpful step. And you know, it's interesting because, like, with my friends who connected with other ex-members of their acting class cult, at the time that those members left, my friends were like, oh, they're just not ready for the teaching. You know, they're just not, they can't get over their ego. You know, like they don't see that the teacher's really full of authority and is only wanting the best for them. She only has your best interest at heart. And that person's just not ready. They must not really want to be an actor. Similar to in a religious setting, well, that person who left, they're just not that committed to God. You know, like they're just not there yet. They're on their own path. You know, they're not really ready to sacrifice everything and commit and attain enlightenment or find God or be part of the mission, whatever it is. There's all of these excuses. Or they never were. Exactly. Oh, they were never an authentic believer or earnest student to begin with. So connect with other ex-members, because you'll find a lot of parallels and a lot of support too. I think, go easy on yourself and talk to other people who have left if you can. I think are really helpful starting places if you've realized that you have been part of a destructive group.
So fascinating to hear about your experiences, and I am very grateful that you've been able to come back onto the show to give us more of your insights. As before, I will leave links to your social media, website, and book in the description below. And all that's left to say is thank you very much indeed, Alice, for coming back on To Talk Beliefs.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark. I really appreciate it.